Welcome everybody into another edition of Warm Weather Fans, the Sun Belt podcast. My name is Brian Stone, joined this week by Zeke Palermo, fresh off of his getting well again, I guess. Before we get to anything else, we are live on both YouTube and X, so you can visit our pages there. If you are on YouTube, you can submit comments/questions through the chat. So as always, this is going to go up on our podcast feed as well. So check out our YouTube page. Like I said, we want to do more stuff like this. YouTube.com/@warmweatherfans. You can catch us at Warm Weather Fans on X. Our handles are also in, the little nameplates we have underneath us. Zeke, you were boots on the ground this weekend at a Sunbelt game, watching it live. So how's it going? And tell us a little bit about what that experience was like.
I'm good. I had a bout of sickness last week. I seemingly, without having actually never met the guy, passed it off to Matt, who's out sick today. Hope he's doing all right. I had a good time. I went to go visit my brother, who is a freshman at Southern. Hung out with him and our dad and some of his buddies. Shout out Sam. Shout out the Georgia Southern Ultimate Frisbee team. Turns out they are genuine fans of ours, really big fans of the pod. So shout out Georgia Southern Ultimate Frisbee. It was a good time. I smartly did not wear my Georgia State gear into the stadium, I forgot to pack it. But it was a good time. It was a beautiful day. Played a very exciting game against James Madison. I will spoil my thoughts on the game now. I think Southern is the best team in the East. I think this game solidified it for me.
Wow.
It was tough. They outplayed James Madison, and it's kind of like the not unlike Georgia Texas this past weekend, where, like, regardless of what you think of the teams, when one is number one and one is number two, when your number two beats number one, I have no option but to put them higher.
Yeah.
I would probably power rank. I would say James Madison is still probably the better team, but Southern beat JMU, and that's all it takes. So, but it was a good time.
Yeah. So, so let's go ahead. Appreciate everybody in the chat. So you were being legit, like the Southern Ultimate Frisbee team, like, knows about our podcast?
So two guys that I was back in high school was in the marching band with, are on the team. And so that, I'm friends with them. I'm buddy with them. And a couple, maybe sometime last season, one of them reached out and was like, yo, we watched the pod. And one of my brother's friends is also on the Ultimate team. And I met him this weekend, and he's like, yeah, we all watch the podcast and listen. So shout out you guys. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate everybody that listens, watches, consumes our content. Like I said, we want to get, anytime we can get involved with you guys and talk with you guys about, anything, like, we're happy to do so. So let's go ahead and kick off talking about the games from this past week. So Tuesday night, Matt and I actually recorded our last episode on Tuesday. I think I mentioned that on the show. But by the time we had even gotten to previewing this week, the game was essentially already over. It was like South Alabama had already jumped out to a 19-0 lead over Troy, who is, we talk about it every week, they're offensively challenged. This week is no exception. They scored 9 points against South Alabama's shaky defense. Is that putting it nicely? South Alabama's had some real kind of up and down performances, both as a team and, defensively, offensively, like all over the board. They have talent. It feels like they're just super inconsistent when they decide to show up on one side of the ball versus the other. Gio Lopez had a pretty good game. Was the leading rusher, 67 yards, threw for a touchdown, 158 yards. They simply didn't have to do very much to beat this undermanned, understaffed, under-talented Troy team.
Yeah, Troy was unable to get anything moving in this game. It wasn't until their final drive of the half that they even had a play or a drive that went more than 4 yards. That ended in a 15-play field goal drive. It just I'm willing to shake this off for Troy, as I think kind of the season as a whole, I'm willing to shake off for them. It's just like I came in with pretty high expectations with them. I thought that they were going to do what James Madison has done, and that was retain some sort of, uh, have some sort of spillage despite the mass exodus of coach and staff out of the program. But they've been unable to do that. Disappointing, but nothing positive to say here with Troy. South Al, despite the start to the season, I this is a good win against Troy. They played very well. Not everyone's beating Troy like this. I mean, Texas State allowed 17. Say what you want about that defense, but I
Yep.
mean, and UL Monroe only beat them by 4. So this was a good win for South Al. I want to know, Brian, how many years at South Alabama does Gio Lopez spend? Because this guy is proving to be a legitimate quarterback for them. And it's only really a matter of time before he gets poached.
You think so? Um, I I think that if you use the eye test, I think he would be like a really solid quarterback. I think the problem is he just doesn't really have the counting stats.
Mm-hmm.
And if a G4, power 4 team, not a G4, a power 4 team decided to dip into the portal and potentially look, I think they would have a hard time kind of stomaching his stat lines because again, he is a good quarterback. I'm not going to take that away from him, but he has games like this where you're like you don't really have to give like a full-throated kind of performance because you're playing against a team that's so challenged offensively that like they really can't even test you. So you don't again, led the team 67 yards and a touchdown on the ground, threw for 158 and a touchdown as well. But it's just one of those things like they just don't he is very efficient as a passer, but let's put it this way. Okay, they've played 7 games. He hasn't cracked 1500 yards passing yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at barely over 200 yards a game. His touchdown to interception numbers are good, 13-1, but I think teams would just look at that and say, yeah, he's just not asked to throw the ball very much. And obviously he has rushing production as well, but I feel like teams would look at that and go, he could be our plan B or C out of the portal. Like he doesn't necessarily need to be like a priority ad for us.
Right.
So
But
I think he could
he's
come
only a
into a
freshman.
I know, but I'm just saying
I
I
think
think
that's the
he
lead
could
here.
come in and compete for a spot somewhere. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as like bringing a guy in and just making him the starter dead off the rip, like I just I don't see that for him right now. Like he's going to have to improve. I think his numbers like again, these guys are not watching. These big coaches are not watching film on all of these lower tier quarterbacks. So I think it'd be kind of difficult sell at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a good win for South Alabama. They held Troy to, and we say Troy is offensively challenged, and by God, we mean it. 167 yards of total offense for Troy, 3 turnovers. So the Jaguars forced 3, got the ball from them 3 times. So again, great win, but it is Troy.
Yep.
Troy is still kind of paying for the last couple years where they were just dominant in the conference. So with that, South Alabama is now 3-4 and 2-1 in the Sun Belt. Troy drops to 1-6 and is now 0-3 in the conference. This next one here, Marshall beats Georgia State 35-20. This game was actually excuse me, a lot closer than it seems on first glance.
Yep.
It was really, um, you know, a garbage time touchdown run that made this one look better than it was. I mean, it was 28-20 with like a minute to go, and AJ Turner rips off a 88-yard touchdown run. AJ Turner, I've been singing his praises on this podcast the last couple weeks. He was amazing when you finally give him the volume. Hey, Charles Huff, you want to
Mhm.
give him the volume? Finally, you want to let Braxton play full time? Yeah, that'd be great. AJ Turner has 177 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on 15 carries. He also caught a touchdown, so he had 4 touchdowns by himself. This is kind of just what we've been talking about with State, though. Their defense isn't very good. Valaire finally got pulled. He was terrible to start this game. Zach Gibson comes in. He's at least respectable as a passer. That's kind of all you can
Mhm.
ask for with this offense.
Yeah. The plan was all week for both of them to get time, both Valaire and Zach Gibson. Valaire ultimately only got like a drive and a half, maybe even a drive. Charles Huff saved his job. I think a loss to Georgia State would have, without question, cost him his job. He made the right calls, as you've been talking about for weeks, starting Braylon Braxton over Stone Earl. Maybe the best decision he's made all year, if not during his tenure at Marshall. And then again, getting AJ Turner the volume. That is what I've been saying about App all year. Has been App is a team much like Marshall that in recent years has had running back after running back after running back. And for whatever reason, wasn't willing to give a guy an opportunity this year. App started the year not giving Kanye Roberts those types of touches where he could become the next guy. He wasn't going to be Cameron Peoples. He wasn't going to be Nate Noel. But App State is a team that has historically relied on a primarily, or, like one primary back. And Marshall is the same way. Now that they're giving AJ Turner those touches and letting him run alongside Braylon Braxton, who's also a very strong runner, better than Cole Pennington and Stone Earl, certainly. I think Marshall is going to win a few more games. Now, is this the turnaround of the season where they, all of a sudden are going to make a late push for the conference championship or even a bowl game? Probably not. I think they have 2 more wins on the schedule, but they're not necessarily gimmies, those being Southern Miss and Old Dominion. But that was
I
the
think
story of this.
Southern Miss is a gimme. Come on. I mean, be real for a minute. Like that's a gimme.
Yeah, especially something we haven't talked about yet. Will Hall finally gone. But I think Charles Huff saved his job at least for the rest of the year because now they're sitting at 4 wins.
Yep.
Going to end with at least 5. He bought himself another year, and that's something I wasn't confident he was going to be able to do.
Yeah. Did you listen to the episode that we did, Matt and I, last week about kind of when I recapped the Marshall Georgia Southern game?
When when it came out, I was
Okay.
still dead as a doornail.
Okay. So when I'm just going to recap it for you, I'm sure people who listen to it, I apologize, but this kind of illustrates my point about Braxton. In the first 4 drives he had against Georgia Southern, he generated 17 of the 23 points Marshall, got the entire Southern game. They pulled him directly after that and
Mhm.
put Stone Earl back in. And then again, he had 2 fumbles in that game, so he definitely wasn't perfect, but when you are a man in the desert and you need a drink of water, you can't turn down, a, a cup from a shoe or what, whatever.
Yeah.
There's some water in a boot, you got to drink it. Like, and they need offense in that same way, which is like Stone Earl's just not he's not a fit for this team. You need more dynamic pass catchers if someone's just gonna stand back there, kind of be a statue. He's got a little bit of mobility, but nothing to the extent that Braxton does. And one of the comments in our chat right now, thank you for everybody that's commenting. Jacob Morrison on YouTube, AJ Turner is him. I agree. I've been
Yeah.
saying for weeks, I'm like, it doesn't make any sense that he's in this 3-headed, backfield where he's having to share time with, frankly, Jordan Houston's been pretty good, but he's not been on the AJ Turner level. Ethan Payne is still siphoning off some carries. So
Yep.
you need to make him your workhorse. And like maybe physically he's kind of a smaller guy, so maybe he's not built for that. But you need to again, Charles Huff finally got through to him like, we need to win some games or I'm not going to be at this school much longer. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people go back and look at the tweet I sent out from the Warm Weather Fans X account. His buyout is a joke. I mean, it's like pennies in the in the penny jar. I think his buyout's like $125,000.
Yeah.
So like, if they want him gone, like it costs next to nothing to get him out of there. So yeah, he does need to finally. He's not like one of these guys, like a Will Hall or a Sean Clark, where it's like we're gonna have to pony up like $800K to get him out of here, or $1 million or whatever. Ricky Ronnie like has turned it around, but his buyout was like 1.3. It doesn't cost them hardly anything to get him out of
Yeah.
West Virginia.
And
So
they're on a bye next week too. So I mean, had they lost it, no better time.
yeah,
That worries me though, because that gives Charles Huff all the more reason to overthink, how they come up against ULM.
I don't think there's any way. I don't think there's any conceivable way he could put a Stone Earl led offense back out there. I think it's one of those things where it's like the toothpaste is out of the tube at this point. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't look at what Braxton is doing and what AJ Turner is doing and being like, let's go back to a 3-headed backfield with Stone Earl taking snaps away. Like
Right.
you're just wasting everyone's time at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you want to keep your job? Great. Like let's see you do something to actually prove it.
Speaking of running backs, before we leave here, because I have to get this in, did you see Freddie Brock?
Yeah, he was good in this one.
Yeah.
So
Don't sound so shocked. The guy's a good runner.
Well, I agree, but it's like he's not on the AJ Turner level or whatever. Like that was always kind of
Right.
my
Right.
gripe, which is like
Oh.
there are better backs, like wholeheartedly better backs in the conference that than Freddie Brock. Like I think he's good, but I don't know. I don't think he's one of these like game wrecker. He's not AJ Turner ripping off an 88-yard touchdown run. So like
Right.
he is good at what he does, but he's not one of these Ismail Mahdi type like electric guys that you're just like, oh my god, you can't keep this guy off the field.
Yeah.
So, well, last thing on this, do you feel good about Zach Gibson taking snaps for the Panthers moving forward?
Um.
Because you're the Georgia
Not
State
really. Right.
correspondent.
Right. Not really. And not because I think he's not worse than Valaire or any of the guys back there. But this season is already a wash and he's a senior. And I just feel like it doesn't get much, there's no reason to go any deeper than that, right? He's not a
Yeah.
senior. Moving forward, he's not going to be the quarterback. There's no reason not to try Braylon Ragland, who's there, Kyle Lau, or just stick with Valaire. I know he's not been exceptional, but he's shown flashes. If you think you might be good enough next year to compete, which the promise of Del McGee is that he's going to bring in the talent to compete quickly. That he's not going to out scheme me, but he's going to put better players on the field is the promise and the shine of what he offers. And so operating under those premises, I don't really understand why you start a senior. It's too late in the season for them to really push for a bowl game. They've only got 2 wins, and it doesn't get easier on the schedule. I don't think they'll make a bowl game. So I'm not, I'm not angry about the decision because, again, this season is a wash, and this season is just get guys in, get them accustomed, get Del McGee settled. But it wouldn't have been my first choice.
I need to go back and re-listen to one of our earlier episodes. I'm fairly sure you and Matt made like a tattoo pact, I think, where
We chatted about it.
It was like if Georgia State made a bowl game, you had to get a Panthers tattoo, and if Matt, I think it was like Louisiana has to win the conference for him to get a tattoo
I think it was
of the
hit their
logo.
over under, which was like 9 or something.
Well, they're 6-1, so
it's close.
It's in play. It's in play. He better hope they drop 2 more games somehow out of conference because he wants them to win, but he needs to avoid getting a fleur de lis or whatever he was
Well,
down
he
for.
said he was planning on getting one anyway, so it wasn't much of a wager.
Yeah. Oh well. Well, with that, Marshall improves to 4-3 and is now 2-1 in the Sun Belt. Georgia State dropped to 2-4 and is now 0-3 in the conference. Getting into this next one here. So I watched a lot of this game. Louisiana, and I guess it's good I did since Matt's not here, but Louisiana beats Coastal Carolina. Coastal was doing actually a kind of an impressive job hanging around here, considering how much of a disaster Ethan Vasco's been as of late. So they finally put Noah Kim in, and he looked passable, which is
Yeah.
amazing considering how bad Vasco's looked. It's just weird that they keep rolling Vasco back out, and again, finally, like maybe Charles Huff, maybe Tim Beck, now that he's just fired his offensive coordinator and has taken over play calling duties. Maybe he's like, I've seen enough. Like Noah Kim, you're just the dude moving forward. Like maybe
Yeah.
we just start over.
I thought this was the most impressive Coastal's offense has frankly looked all year. I mean, especially when
Yeah,
you consider the teams that they've played, like they put up as many points against Louisiana as they did Jacksonville State. This was a good offensive game for them.
yeah.
It's just I think this game is just well, for one, the OC firing was a scapegoat. They needed to blame somebody. Maybe he did need to go. It was Trinket, right? He
Trick it.
Tricket.
Yeah.
I like to call him Trinket. It's more
Well,
fun.
I think it should say something that Tim Beck has an offensive background and the
Right.
offense was still as bad. So you basically had an offensive minded head coach and an offensive coordinator, and you guys putting your heads together couldn't figure out that Ethan Vasco and the play calling was an issue. So
Right.
now it's going to change because you put a new quarterback in and you fired your OC. Like, again, yeah, scapegoat for sure, but it's year 2. Like, it's not like, hey, we've had this. I mean, to be frank, they're 4-3. It's not like they're, Southern Miss where it's like everybody, we need to have a fire sale. Everything must go. It's like, hey guys, it's still pretty early in your tenure. This is game 19 for the Tim Beck era or
Right.
whatever it is. So like, it's tough to just automatically be like, no, it's all this guy's fault. Like, is
Uh,
it?
I'm excited to see how this story develops because this news broke today as we're recording it on Monday. The firing happened. I'm curious to see how this plays out because Beck is going to take over the play calling duties. I want to know how much of this decision was him.
Yeah.
Obviously the coach is going to have a say in that call, but
Hmm.
I wonder if this was like a push out of the way that Trickett wanted Vasco. Where I'm certain there's something behind this because, like you said, like this is not. It's been a disappointing Coastal offense, but it's not been catastrophic. Um,
No,
and
it's
it's not.
just mostly been inconsistent.
Yeah,
Like, they've had games where they were in shootouts, and then they've had other games where they were, like, struggling to score 24 points, and
and
it's
that was
just
because of Ethan Vasco,
right. But
almost entirely.
I'll say this, so, again, I was watching this when Louisiana goes up 2 touchdowns, early in the second quarter, and I kind of was like, here we go."
Hmm.
Coastal's just kinda gonna roll over and die. They put Noah Kim in. He throws 2 second quarter touchdown passes. Boom, it's 17-14 at half. It's, midway through the third quarter, they get a field goal. It's 17 all. And then, Wooldridge takes them down on a long 12 play, 81-yard drive, takes up 7 minutes of the fourth quarter. And I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going to tuck the Chanticleers in. This is going to be night night. And then no, Braden Bennett rips off a 50-yard touchdown run and makes it 24-24 with 10:52 to go. And I was like, holy crap. Like, also, one of the things I really brought up on last week's episode, um, and I know you were out of commission just being sick and all, but
Hmm.
I said this last week. Louisiana did not look like they wanted to tackle Kanye Roberts in that
Right.
App State game at all. Like, they would come up and it was like instead of meeting him in the hole, it was like they'd come up and then take a step back, and then he would just run right through someone's chest. Like that was kind of how their tackling method was. It kind of was the same deal here. I mean, Coastal had 400 yards of total offense for a team that had been offensively challenged and ultimately fired their offensive coordinator. But the play of the day was Ben Woldridge hits Terrence Carter. I posted this highlight on our profile on X because I just couldn't believe when it was happening at the time. He rolls out, gets some space, launches this moon ball. Terrence Carter is downfield between 2 or 3 defenders and just jumps over them, brings it down, and the defenders just kind of run into one another. And then he just takes it into the end zone, and that was pretty much the game right there. I mean, that was with 2:34 to go, so that came up 27-24. That really sealed it. I mean, they were just at that point, yeah, that felt like the dagger, but it was amazing that Coastal was in this game for as long as they were. And I do think a real problem is going to be Louisiana moving forward, just letting teams kind of hang around. Like they've done this, like they kind of did this against Southern Miss. They did this against App. They've now done it against Coastal, where it takes like a really good possession at the end of the game to really put them away. And I know good teams win, great teams cover, but it's been kind of a real struggle to get like a full 60-minute performance out of their offensive defense, especially if their defense has not really impressed me all that much.
Yeah.
So
I would not have believed you if you told me that the West was going to come down to the ULM game this year.
I know
that is ridiculous to me. And as Matt said, I don't know if he reiterated it last week, but he said 2 weeks ago, this is the most scared he's been in who knows how long about that game.
Yeah.
Because here's the
Since
thing.
2020, he said.
Louisiana is probably the better team, but they're App Stating it right now. Pittsburgh Steelersing, if you will.
Their Louisiana's offense is their strength. ULM's defense is their strength, and it goes the opposite way. Louisiana's defense is their weakness, and ULM's offense is their weakness. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup with those two kind of styles, where it's like the unstoppable force meets a movable object, and then it's just the opposite of that on the other side of the ball, where Ahmad Hardy's going to have to like really do something. They're going to have to decide to tackle Ahmad Hardy, which they've been reticent to tackle anybody that's been running the football as of late. So I don't really know how that game's going to turn out. But with that, Louisiana moves to 6-1 and is now 3-0 in the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina drops to 4-3 and is now 1-2 in the Sun Belt. I know that you have jumped off of the Texas State hype train. Like that was a reality a couple weeks ago, but even this had to be hard to stomach for you. So Texas State goes into Norfolk and loses by 10, 24-14. Jordan McLeod was so bad in this one. Like I really can't. And Jacob Morrison in the chat once again, appreciate him. Whoever wins the West wins the conference. Yeah, probably. I mean, if anybody's been watching this, the teams in the East are nothing to write home about. And I say that as a fan of the team that's currently in first. Yep. So, like, if I'm saying that, I'm not doing the puffing my chest out, being like, no, we're going to beat whoever. If we made it that far and had to play ULM, that would scare the hell out of me. Like, because, again, our defense is up and down, and we'll get to the JMU game, and our offense, you never know what you're going to get. It's like Forrest Gump talking about life and being a box of chocolates. So, it's just, yeah. So I don't know. Jordan McLeod was not good. And I think what it is Old Dominion runs this 3-3-5 front, which makes them more, they can drop like up to 8 into coverage. Right. And I think it makes it really difficult to throw the football against that when again they're covering every blade of grass. Ismail Mahdi, the way that you combat that front is just by running the heck out of the football, and they did. Ismail Mahdi had almost 140 yards rushing, but it just wasn't enough to finally get them into the end zone. Like they kept sputtering out. Jordan McLeod again, 17 of 33, 173, 1 touchdown. Zeke, you got to give me again, I know you're off the hype train, so it's fine,
Yeah.
but you got to give me kind of the thought process on this one.
Texas State, having watched them the past 2 weeks or so, 2-3 weeks, is like if your ex-girlfriend gets arrested. Because here's the thing, I don't care. It doesn't impact me, but man, do I look bad. Really? You were with her? She got the public intox,
Yeah.
indecency, and you were
Yeah.
with her? That
Mm-hmm.
that's how I feel every time I was checking the score on this game, keeping up with the play-by-play on the CBS app, but I I don't think obviously Jordan McLeod's performance was subpar, not what his standard is. Obviously Sunbelt Player of the Year, but he was in a position that I don't know if he's ever been in his Sunbelt career, and that was down 2 touchdowns at halftime. So
No, he hasn't been in that situation before, I'm pretty sure. He definitely
I
wasn't last year.
Certainly not, and not by that many at Texas State either. So,
Mm-hmm.
it was a statistically poor game for him, but he was pushing the ball downfield. He was putting the ball in riskier spots than normal, even with Ismail Mahdi doing everything he could. They still
Yeah.
had to pass the ball downfield, and they've got guys. Joey Hobart being, for 2 years now, kind of the top guy there. They have receivers that it could have worked, but it just didn't. So I say that not to look into Texas State. I also implore everyone to not read into this game for Old Dominion, because this is what Old Dominion does. I don't know how many of these types of games they're going to have to win to convince me that they are legitimate. I don't know if there's actually a number. But this Old Dominion team is just going to keep having weird offensive breakouts until Ricky Ronnie, I don't know, goes home to pasture or something.
Well, it's strange,
Because
right? It's strange because
Mhm.
ODU's 2 of their 4 losses, I recognize that they've lost to like Virginia Tech and stuff. 2 of their 4 losses came against Coastal that just fired their offensive coordinator, and I think Coastal scored 45 in that game. And
Yep.
then that came to East Carolina, who became the first team to fire a head coach in the FBS this season.
Yeah.
So like and I understand Colton Joseph wasn't starting then, it was still the Grant Wilson time,
Mhm.
but like what does that say kind of about that team? It says as good as they've been as of late, there's always the opportunity that they just backslide. And I think the problem and why the Old Dominion stuff looks really good right now, but I think even past this week's game, like they could beat Southern, like whatever that could happen. The stuff that's not sustainable is Colton Joseph being the entire offense.
Right.
Like you can't have your leading receiver with 36 yards and expect like, hey, we're going places this season. You just can't. Like if by some stretch Old Dominion was to make the title game, and let's say they ran into ULM's defense, do you think they're letting Colton Joseph run for 111 yards and 3 touchdowns? Probably
Certainly
not.
not.
So you're going to have to be balanced. You're going to have to be able to throw as well as run the football. And I just none of these offenses where it's all one guy have worked kind of in the Sun Belt, where
Mhm.
it's like our quarterback does everything and everybody else is basically like a future insurance salesman. So
Right.
like it's just not sustainable. Like it doesn't work. So he's been really really hot as of late. Credit to
Yeah.
Ricky Ronnie for getting him in there because he's been dynamic. And we've talked about this with Braxton. We've talked about this with other guys as well. You, if you are not talented at your other skill positions, you have to have a quarterback that has mobility to open things up, extend plays, become like a creator. And Old Dominion has not had that up to this point. They've been very much the stereotypical five drop, 7 step, pocket passers that don't move all that much, and that clearly hasn't been a winning formula.
Yeah.
So maybe they found something in Colton Joseph, but if one of these pass catchers doesn't step up, like for real step up, and one of the running backs doesn't help Joseph out, then it's going to end bad because they're just not going to defenses eventually are just not going to focus on anybody else because they're not scared of them.
Yeah. I
So
mean, they've suffered to the same problem that Southern Miss has had the past several years, and that like you just said, it's just the lack of dynamicism. Dynamicism. I'm not sure how you say that word, but
I think you got it.
especially at quarterback. And what Old Dominion has had over Southern Miss in that comparison has been they've actually had skill players. Obviously, Southern Miss had
Yeah.
Frank Gore, but outside of that, it was Barron. Old Dominion's had a few guys the past 2 or 3 years since they joined the Sun Belt, and now that they have a dynamic quarterback, it feels like all those skill position guys are fading into just kind of obscurity. And
Mhm.
I suppose I'm just beating the drum of what you just said, that is unsustainable. In his when Joseph played against Georgia State, he was also the team's leading rusher. He also played against Coastal, and they got Devin Roche for 86 yards on the ground there. But Joseph also had a strong rushing game there. So he's a freshman. They can keep him around for a while, and if they can put a good cast around him, if they can put a good offensive line in front of him, Old Dominion could kind of flip the script. But
Yeah.
as it stands right now, like I don't care if they win 2 more of these games you don't anticipate them to or whatever. It's going to be same Old Dominion.
So to kind of put a button on this game, I think the issue is that in the past, Old Dominion's basically been able to conjure up like one solid skill position player around whoever's played quarterback, whether it be like Blake Watson or I can't remember that receiver's name off the top of my head that ended up transferring to Virginia Tech the next year.
Was that
Um,
Ollie Jennings?
yeah, Ollie Jennings the third. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean is like typically you've got one of those guys when it would be nice to have like three. You
Yeah.
know, you would like to be able to surround your quarterback with a little bit more talent than what they've given him so far. But I would say Ricky Ronnie has saved his job with this performance and finding Colton Joseph the last couple of games, but they were never going to fire him anyway, so it's all kind of moot point at that point. Old Dominion improves to 3-4 and is now 2-1 in the conference. Texas State drops to 4-3 and is now 2-1 in the Sun Belt. Let's get to the Georgia Southern game. So you were boots on the ground for this.
Mhm.
I guess behind enemy lines. Like I don't really know how you see it. Um, I don't. Georgia Southern's defense dominated this game for 60 straight minutes, and
Oh yeah.
like I don't feel like that is an under. I don't feel like I'm underplaying that at all. I think through 3 quarters, James Madison had like 100 yards of offense. Alonzo Barnett was
Mhm.
absolutely terrible in this game. I think he finished what was it 16 of 33 for like 186 yards, I believe the final number was. He threw for 1 touchdown and even that was kind of questionable. I thought the receiver kind of got away with offensive pass interference there.
Yeah.
um
He certainly did.
did you okay, I was like I'm not going crazy, right? Like every time I watch the replay he's got a full arm fully extended pushing the receiver away.
Mhm.
Um and you know, to be honest, JC French wasn't great either, so I'm not saying that like
No.
you know Barnett was you know got blown out by JC French, but Southern's defense was on Barnett from the first snap, and I know they had trouble with the center getting the ball to him for some reason, but they stacked the box. They refused to let him you know have open throwing lanes, and they played like tough man press coverage, and Barnett and the receivers just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, Southern sacked Barnett 6 times. They had 3 other tackles for loss. You mentioned that was maybe the sloppiest start to a game I've seen in a while.
Both
With
sides.
both sides fumbled. James Madison fumbled like 2 or 3 straight snaps. The first one was a bad snap, or wasn't handled properly. The second one, Alonzo Barnett was up at the line trying to make an adjustment, and the center just snaps the ball. They end up punting. Georgia Southern gets the ball, and they do the exact same thing. They can't field the snap. I was incredibly impressed by Georgia Southern's defense, especially against a James Madison team that has been very strong offensively. Um, and has some really guys. I mean, Alonzo Barnett, I think has been a really sneaky good quarterback this year. He's been very good, and they held him very well. My biggest takeaway was that Georgia Southern has a dude in Jalen White. He's been there
Yeah.
several years and has been that dude. But I mean, as with any player, like seeing him in person really gives you a different understanding. Watching that guy up close, he is that dude.
They have honestly a really good trio of running backs with, he didn't play on Saturday, but you've got White, you've got
Mm-hmm.
OJ Arnold, who's dynamic in space. You've got Badinga, who ripped off a touchdown run on Saturday as well. So this has kind of been the drum that I've been beating ever since last year, which is they have the ability to run the football. It's just Brian Ellis, for some reason, just did not want to do it. And I don't really understand why he was so against it. I don't know if he promised Bryn he would hit like X number of pass attempts, but they were doing it to the detriment of the team last year, throwing the football as much as they did, especially with how turnover prone Bryn was. Yeah, and I've got a couple of different things I want to hit because there were things I saw, and then there were other things that were off the field that I wanted to talk about as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I had said this a couple weeks ago. JMU's defense was going to be a concern, and it was. I mean, they allowed 405 yards. They forced 4 turnovers, and the team only scored 14 points, including a pick 6. So that should kind of tell you the turnovers, they weren't fluky because they definitely happened. But
Mm-hmm.
when they weren't forcing turnovers, it was feast and famine. Like it would Jalen White, like you said, Badingo ripped off a couple of really good runs. Derwin Burgess had a receiving touchdown. JC French threw for three touchdowns, also had 3 picks. Like I know. And I think Dexter Williams really needs to have like a fair shot of starting Thursday. Like they need to take a hard look in practice this week and see if JC French is who they really, because now you're in the driver's seat of the
Mm-hmm.
Sun Belt, like East. I mean, you need to know, hey, can we trust this guy? Because this isn't like another season like last year where the team is melting down and you just need to throw somebody out there and hope for the best and maybe we get this guy some reps. You're in the driver's seat. Like you can make the Sun Belt title game. Now, the defense has to keep up their level of play, obviously, but he can't turn the ball over as much as he has the last couple games. It's been really rough to watch.
I tweeted this out. He's starting to look like a real true Georgia Southern quarterback now.
Turnover prone, yeah.
Three yeah, it's incredible. I want to
Well,
hear you weigh in on
okay,
this. I really think Georgia Southern's the best team in the East right now.
I think I mean, yeah. Like honestly, regardless of record, I think Marshall is the second best team in the East if they play the guys that should be playing. Like the reason that they don't have more wins is because Stone Earl was shoved in at quarterback multiple times when he shouldn't have been. If
Right.
they play the team, if they play the pieces on offense that they should with AJ Turner and Braylon Braxton and Fitzpatrick as their main pass catcher, I think they're a better team than James Madison. I think they have a better defense than James Madison has. I think Barnett has these games where if you speed him up and rush him and force him to make decisions quickly and he can't just sit back through and make reads and stuff. Like I just yeah, I okay. So I assume this is your brother, Sam, right?
Yeah.
Brian, I get you had to suffer through old Southern teams. You have to stop doubting them. Sam, you haven't lived, bud. You haven't been snake bit in the way that I've been snake bit before. We had a really strong season when I was a senior, and we won the conference and everything since then has been one good year and then ultimate disappointment follows. So you haven't gotten the full you haven't gotten the full complement of Georgia Southern
You'll
football
have to
yet.
forgive him. He is he's a fanboy for sure. I mean, he's not willing to hear any other argument about Southern right now.
Hey, in 2014, I was him. I was like, Willie Fritz is here. We're never gonna die. Blah blah blah. And then guess what? Willie Fritz leaves for Tulane, and it all falls apart. So like, I've been in his shoes. Even through the Monken years when they finally beat Florida in the swamp, like I was like, yeah, dude, we're gonna do this. No, we did it one time, and we did it, but it hasn't really replicated since. The other thing I wanted to bring up too, this was kind of off the field. JMU fans seem to be like in disbelief. Like they can't parse out that they have a team that might not be running the conference for the first time. I don't know if did you see some of the tweets like on Saturday? It was all like, "Oh my god, like they can't throw the ball and like they can't play defense. Like what are we going to do? We have no hope." And I'm like, welcome to the club. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Like you guys are just now figuring what
Well,
everybody else knew.
it's new for them. You'll have to forgive them. And again, Brian, I'm sure you had a similar epiphany at some point. They're not used to this. They were the FCS team and came into the FBS and dominated this conference for 2 years. And now they are realizing that at the end of the day, this is the Sun Belt. At the end of the day, this is Group of 5 football playing in front of 15,000 fans on a good week. It's just to come to earth.
You're not
I
playing in the Patriot League or whatever anymore.
I feel for them. It's welcome, guys. This is what it's like.
Yeah, like
this is where your fanhood is tested.
Yeah, empires rise and fall all the time. Look at Troy. Look at Troy's last couple years and look where they are now. Look at App's last couple years. Hell, look back further than the last couple years. Look at what App's done the last like 8 years or so, and look at where they are now. Like this stuff happens to every other team except nobody. Like nobody is exempt from this. Like even Matt said that Louisiana was disappointing last year. I'm pretty sure they still won 8 games. Like there are levels to disappointment for sure, but every team goes through this. So like I'm sorry, JMU. Like we totally disagreed with the NCAA rules and moving up from FCS to FBS last year and not being able to be in the conference championship and all of that stuff. However, this is kind of the way it goes, man. Like you're gonna have to deal with a season where you're like, we don't know who you don't think Southern, the team you just like lost to, hasn't gone through who's our quarterback. I don't know. We're just starting some dude and hoping for the best every week. That was us literally a year ago. 12 months ago, we were in your shoes. Like, couldn't play defense. Quarterback couldn't stop turning the ball over. Couldn't run the football consistently. Like, yeah, that was what we were doing. So, every team goes through it. So, with that, Georgia Southern is 5-2. They're 3-0 in the Sun Belt. And in the driver's seat, they control kind of their own destiny at this point in the East. James Madison is now 5-2 and 1-2 in the conference. Last game of the night, Arkansas State ends Will Hall's Southern Miss coaching career 44-28. Yeah, we salute you. Sayonara, via con Dios, Will Hall. It probably should have happened at the end of last year, but for some reason they wanted to let you light 2024 on fire as well. I don't know if it was the buyout or whatever, but anytime you have to release a statement at the end of the year saying we will be better, but this guy's coming back, you might as well go ahead and fire him then because you're punting the next season.
Yep. We talked about this kind of before we got on air, Brian. Will Hall in the post-game presser of this game, he knew it was obvious. He had to have known. And I took away from his statements, my biggest takeaway was selling himself to other teams. He was saying, I know what it takes to win, and I've been around winning, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a process, and I've been around it, and I've seen it, and I know what it. First of all, when?
When was that?
When? Point it to me. It was a poor man's version of Kurt Signetti saying, I win, look me up. Except
right.
Kurt Signetti is ranked, took an FCS team into the FBS and dominated, and got a Power 5 job at Indiana within 2 years.
Will Hall is now 7-0 at Windiana.
Will Hall, you got knocked out of the Division II playoffs 4 years in a row. What do you win? With that said, we're looking for a fourth co-host with a little bit of ball knowledge to join me as the ball knowers of the pod. So Will
Nope.
Hall, this is not a joke. Will Hall, I will be reaching out to your people. We'd love to have you.
Will Hall,
Permanently or for a special.
if he joins, he better have a good sense of humor about it because we will make jokes. So I'm just letting you know that right now. Like I will let a joke here or two fly. So if you're gonna get your feathers ruffled, maybe now is not the best time to join. But yeah, I mean Arkansas State. I will say this, Southern Miss stayed in it through halftime. It was 28-21. Um, Ethan Crawford has kind of been able to do kind of a poor man's Colton Joseph impersonation the last couple weeks. He's got some mobility, but it's not great. They don't have any real weapons around him. They desperately miss Frank Gore Jr. from last year. Crawford's not really that impressive throwing the football. Jalen Rayner had a really good game once again, 186 yards, 3 touchdowns. I said he would finally get on the positive end of the touchdown interception ratio, and he did. He's finally up over 1-1. Jaquez Cross, 127 yards and a touchdown for Arkansas State as well. Yeah, basically Arkansas State just ran away with it in the second half. Like this game was not close after the third quarter. I mean, it was 41-21. Southern Miss, rest in pieces, Will Hall's Southern Miss coaching career because it's mercifully now done.
Where do you stand? Because obviously the conversation is who's next, and I think Charles Huff is probably the top name. Sean Clark is a dark horse there, but before the season, I was banging the drum that it was, oh my God, I'm forgetting his name.
Who does he coach for?
Arkansas State, the bum from Tennessee.
Oh,
Why am I
Butch
Jones? I don't know why I lost
from Tennessee.
I don't know why I lost his name. But they're 4-3 now. And while I still don't believe in this team by any stretch of the imagination, and perhaps that's my own hubris, what's the lookout for him here?
I think he's going to hang on to his job for another year.
How long does he have? I know we look this up every week.
Left on his contract?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that off the top of my head.
It was 5 years in 2020, so he's got one season after this on his current deal.
Well, they're going to have to extend him because I think he will stick around another season, especially if they finish 7-5, 6-6, I think they will let him stick around. And frankly, you can't have a guy on the recruiting trail who doesn't have a contract and are just like, he's like, hey, come to Arkansas State. And they're like, are you going to coach Arkansas State next year? And he's like, I don't know. You should come though, regardless.
They extended him 1 year, so he's through 26 right now.
Okay. So, but they're going to have to extend him again because that question's going to be asked next year. I think he's going to be back next year. I think he'll probably coach all the way through 26 unless Rayner, does like a Zion Chris and decides he wants to go hold a clipboard somewhere for NIL money. I feel they're fine. I mean, they still don't have a defense, and they struggle to. If Southern Miss is putting up 28 on you, that's not a good sign and anything to be excited about. But offensively, 467 yards of offense. You were able to run the football, which is a rare occurrence for Arkansas State. And it seems like Rayner's kind of back on the right side of things. So it's tough. I mean, they're a pretty middling team overall. They're another one of these clones where it's just all defense or all offense, no defense, and we need to score 40 to win every week. So I don't know. They're going to keep giving him some leeway until like it finally. I think he stays until Jalen Rayner leaves the program, whether it be through transfer or graduation, because I think that's the end of the Willy Wonka style golden ticket, letting him to stick around. Like I don't see it. So yeah, rest in pieces, RIP in peace. Will Hall's Southern Miss coaching career. I think they should go get an FCS head coach who's had success. I've reiterated that multiple times on the podcast, so I'm going to keep banging that drum. But realistically, they'll go grab like a coordinator from somewhere, and that's a mixed bag, so you never know what you're going to get. But we'll see. I mean, either way, Arkansas State is now 4-3 and 2-1 in the conference. Southern Miss drops to 1-6 and is now 0-3 in the Sun Belt. All right, so let's get into week 9. Do you have that in front of you? The
Yep.
spreads and everything?
You want me to run through it?
Yeah, start with Georgia Southern ODU, and then I'll pick it up from there.
Okay. Yeah. So we start Thursday. That'll be the day this episode comes out. Georgia Southern at Old Dominion, 7:00 on ESPN2. Line is Old Dominion -2, which I am very critical of betting analysts who are going to, give you locks. I think it's filthy and slimy and gross and unethical, but holy cow. And over under, excuse me. Sorry. Sounds like
Zeke has a ghost.
Yeah. Someone dropped a bowl, or that's just Will Hall. He's pissed.
He's haunting your house.
He's here and he's angry. Over under is 53.5. Line is Old Dominion -2. For me, this is easy. Give me Old Dominion Southern +2. No. Give me Southern +2.
Little too much dip on your chip. I'm gonna go under of 53.5. Georgia Southern unders have really been hitting lately. Georgia Southern is offensively challenged, even though they had a good game last week. They still struggled. Your brother's in here. He says, "How is Southern the underdog?" It's because everybody has this pegged as a trap game for them. Sam, let me take you back. I'm gonna put you on a little history lesson since I'm the pessimistic one, even though I've lived through this. So the year that we were a 10-win team in 2018, Chad Lunsford's the head coach. We've got what's his name, Shy Wirtz. Like, everything's working. We figured it out. We finally replicated the spread option formula. They beat App on Halloween. Were in the driver's seat for the East. Came out, laid an egg the next week against either ULM or Troy. I can't remember, because this was a 2-year thing. So in 2018, they laid an egg against Troy that immediately wiped them out of contention to go to the Sun Belt title game. 2019, same thing happens. They beat App on Halloween. Next week, they come out and get upset by ULM in a game that isn't close. So frankly, Vegas just has them as getting mousetrapped by ODU in this one. I'm going to stay away from the line altogether. I think the final score of this one's going to be like 24-21. Which side has more points at this point? I don't know, because if Dexter Williams was playing, I would feel better about Southern's chances, because I know that he wouldn't be turning the ball over quite as much. At least he didn't in the Marshall game that he played. But Old Dominion struggles to score points. They're a one-man offense at this point with Colton Joseph. Georgia Southern runs the ball effectively, but Ryan Applin, the offensive coordinator, will just have entire quarters where he goes like brain dead, and you're like, why did we do that for a whole quarter? Zeke, you watched it play out. Wasn't there a whole quarter? I think it was the third quarter. They just they didn't do anything.
Yeah, they came out flat, but that's kind of been like the Clay Helton teams. You've said this forever, that this team just kind of gives up, win or lose, kind of gives up on games at times. And that was the third quarter for sure. They turned it around in the fourth, at least, to put it away. And again, especially defensively, but offensively, they went flat.
Yeah. And they have a tendency to do that. And if Old Dominion was this really high-scoring offensive team, that would scare me, but they're not really. They're real, methodical. I think it all comes down to, is Brandon Bailey, the defensive coordinator at Southern, is he going to be stubborn and say, we're not going to put a spy on Colton Joseph? Because if that's the case, then yeah, he's going to tear them up the same way the Nevada quarterback did on the ground when we played them. But if he's doing what he did on Saturday, and he's like, we're sending exotic blitzes, and we're sending 5-6 guys, we're playing bump and run man press because we know that Old Dominion doesn't have anybody that scares us. on the receiving side of things, then yeah, I give Southern a really good shot to win. It just again, this is the Forrest Gump analogy. You never know what you're going to get. Could be anything. So I'm leaning Georgia Southern +2, but my official pick will be the under because I don't think either of these teams are going to be putting up a 40 burger. Like I just don't. I don't see it. So let's start on Saturday. I've got it good to go now. So
Sweet.
1:00 on ESPN Plus, we've got Georgia State going to Kid Brewer to take on App. App is an 8-point home favorite, over under 62.5. Georgia State is 0-10 all time against App State. Never beaten the Mountaineers in the history of playing these two. I'm taking App -8. There's just something about when Georgia State sees the black and gold, they don't want any part of it, and I think that keeps up on Saturday. Like they do this. So
History aside, I think App just outclasses Georgia State right now. State's got a lot to figure out, and as I'll continue saying the rest of the year, that's okay at this point. Give me App here.
I think going back to the Georgia State Georgia Southern game, I think if App just runs Kanye Roberts a lot, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like limit the amount of times Joey Aguilar throws the ball because he's kind of become turnover prone as well. Yeah, just make it the Kanye Roberts show on offense, and I think they'll be fine. Georgia State just right now doesn't have the dogs like on the defensive side of the ball to make it work. Next one here. 3:30 ESPN Plus, Harrisonburg, Virginia. Southern Miss, the headless chicken, is traveling to James Madison to take on they're the Monarchs, right? No, that's ODU.
The Dukes.
Never mind. The Dukes. Sorry. JMU is a 24.5 point favorite. Over unders 54.5. I'm going to take the under in this one as well. That's a lot of points. And like, I don't have high hopes for Southern Miss coming off of firing Will Hall, but has anyone seen JMU play lately? Have you seen JMU's offense?
I don't know where the 24.5 is. Here's the thing, like James Madison could come out and do the 24.5. It's certainly possible. Certainly within the very realistic realm of possibility. But neither of these teams are combining for 54.5. I think James Madison is going to come out of there with 24, could hit 27. Southern Miss is going to score under 17. Give me the under.
I agree. It's one of those things when you bet an over-under, it takes two to tango. And frankly, Southern Miss's shoes on are backwards if we're keeping this this analogy going. Like they don't have any sort of continuity with either side of the ball. You have no idea what they're giving you at any given point. So unless James Madison beats them 56-7, I don't see how this game hits the over. And James Madison's not been good the last 2 weeks against ULM and Southern. Next one here, UL Monroe, 5:00 ESPN Plus. UL Monroe's traveling to Mobile. South Alabama is a 7.5 point home favorite. To quote SpongeBob, how many times do we have to teach lesson, old man? So ULM plus 7.5 is easy. They will keep it within 8 points. Like even if they lose, even if South Alabama finds a way to win, they won't beat them by more than 8 points.
Yeah. I have to assume that this is still just like algorithm formulas overcorrecting for that 87 bomb, because what has anyone seen from South Alabama to make them think that they're going to beat ULM?
The App State game like 4 or 5 weeks ago is what it is.
I don't want to call it fluky, but both of these teams, both South Al and App, are fluky teams. Give me ULM.
Yeah. I think ULM plus 7.5 is easy. Like they're probably going to win this game outright, honestly. And I wouldn't be shocked if South Alabama scores the fewest points they've scored all year in this one. So just be on the lookout for that. Final game of the night, 7 p.m. ESPN Plus. Troy, talk about another headless chicken. Troy has no direction on either side of the ball. They have no idea what they're doing. They travel to Jonesboro to take on Arkansas State and Zeke's nemesis Butch Jones. Arkansas State is a 7-point home favorite, over unders 51.5. I did it last week. I'm going back to the well. Arkansas State gets to play the two worst teams in the conference in back-to-back weeks. I'm going to take Arkansas State -7 again.
Yeah, Arkansas State here as well. As much as I don't trust this team, Troy has proven to be nothing but in disarray. Nothing but shambles, especially the past several weeks. Disappointingly, give me Arkansas State.
I'm going to flip my pick, actually. I'm going to say the under of 51.5. I don't think Troy is going to be able to contribute to this at all. Like, I just Arkansas State could screw around and win this game by 3 points, but I just think Troy is so offensively challenged. I think you could put them out there against a D2 defense, and I don't think they'd be able to put up 21. Like, they really struggle.
You just saw Arkansas State put up 44 against Southern Miss. You don't think they can do that again?
I think the inconsistencies with Arkansas State are what give me pause.
Sure.
I think Southern Miss, I said it a couple weeks ago, Southern Miss seemed like they had just kind of given up. Like, they were done, like, as a team with Will Hall's stuff. I think Troy, it's not that they've given up, it's just that they're frankly not that talented. So I'm just going to take the under, just because I gotta think that Troy unders are like 8-0 this year. Like, there's just no way they're not scoring any points this season. So they can't be hitting overs with they're averaging what, like 15.5 points a game. Like, there's no way.
I'm gonna look into that right now. So you keep saying stuff.
Okay, so yeah, I think Jalen Rayner has another really solid performance. I think Jaquez Cross once again plays some good ball. Corey Rucker scores another touchdown. I like him if you like prop bets, anytime touchdown scorer, Corey Rucker. That one hit this past weekend. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna be able to find this in time, but
33% over hit, so 66% they hit the under.
Exactly. So you're what, 6-3 for Troy unders this year?
Yeah.
I assume something like that, along those lines.
About as close as it's going to get to. Actually, you know who has a better under hit rate in the Sun Belt is UL Monroe.
Well, yeah, because they don't
1-4-1.
score. They don't score, but their defense is amazing.
Like Troy's team of pass.
Yeah, exactly. No, actually, Troy was a complete team. They could score on offense. Their defense was a lockdown unit, and ULM struggles to score, but they're not going to let you score more than them. So that's kind of been the thing thus far. So that basically does it. That's the end of this episode. Zeke, let everybody know where they can find you on socials, and I will as well, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. Post about the pod, post about high school sports in my area, and about college football. I've been on, I continuously, week after week, will continue to apologize to Coach Kirby Smart. It is our fault as the fans for Carson Beck's interceptions. That is entirely my fault, and he was right to shame us publicly for that.
What happened with that?
Oh, 2 weeks ago, it was
the Alabama game.
It was the home game before Mississippi State, and I'm not certain who it was. But he, Georgia won, but he came out and he was like, "I'm disappointed in the fans. They weren't being, contributing to our success and our program and our win." And it's just like, I think it's always. I'll give the caveat that there are edge cases when fans are way out of line, but I think it's a bad look when athletes or coaches speak about their fans in that regard, because I'm paying for a product and that product is you. Imagine going to the doctor and the doctor comes in and he's like, "Hey, this guy, he's a little chunky. I don't want to work on him. He's like 10 pounds overweight. I don't want to." And then going in front of national TV and saying, Brian Stone is 10 pounds overweight and therefore I'm disappointed in him. It doesn't work like that, Curb.
So, would you say that one of the experiences of the fans getting out of line is like, let's say, Texas fans throwing
Yeah.
bottles on the field in the middle of a pass interference call?
I think that's a getting out of line. Sometimes, folks will say stuff and like folks will get like crazy. There have been, I think it was the NFL, maybe last season, there were a couple players that came out and were like, yo, quit DMing me death threats. That's fine.
Yeah.
That you can do that. But saying,
Or Browns players getting upset that people are booing Deshaun Watson as they wheel him off the field on a
here's
cart.
the thing, say what you want about his character. I'll say bad things. They should be excited because that dude was dookie.
Yeah, he's trash. As always, you can email the show at warmweatherfans@gmail.com. We're happy to take questions, comments. We might do this live stream again. This was fun.
Yeah.
We always like interacting with people who listen or watch our stuff. You can find me on X at Watch the Stone. And then the show also on X at Warm Weather Fans. We will be back next week to talk more Sunbelt ball. This has been Warm Weather Fans.